Words of this morning's Torah portion, which is chapter 12, the first 3 verses. Anyone want to read that? Actually, I'll read it out loud. Sometimes I forget that there is people watching, and I want them to be able to follow as best they can. So I'll read it out loud, and then I'll invite you for your comments. The Lord said to Avram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." All right. This is really the first thing we're being introduced to about Abraham, the first things we're told about him. So my first question for you is, why this gentleman? Why this gentleman? Why Abraham?
Because he was a good man.
Yeah, where do you see that?
I don't know he's a good man. I read ahead.
You read ahead. You know he's a good man. Okay. So
A better man than Noah.
a better man than Noah. Good. You've read the rabbinic commentaries. You've heard your rabbis talk about this before. So we imagine that this man is a good man, but we actually have no clue. We don't know anything about him, really. So why?
God shows him had to be good.
I'll just point out, God chooses Moses as well, and God punishes Moses and doesn't allow him into the land of Israel.
Because Moses screwed up his forgiveness.
Okay. All right, so
Still a good man.
I'm guessing that Avram, as he was noted,
correct.
may have questioned to himself what was going on in the world, and not looking at a rock and saying, this rock causes something that it doesn't. I can't think of anything else like God would pick a particular person.
Right, so we're literally, there's a lot of loss about why does he choose it. Fred, are you about to say something? Correct. So many of you have probably heard that famous midrash where Abraham's father owned an idol shop and Abraham goes in and leaves the biggest one there and all the other ones are broken. I won't ask you by show of hands, but I've done it before. Many people think that text is in the Torah. It's not. That is the rabbis trying to answer this very question of why Abraham.
I'm just saying, for the people online, will you repeat what they say?
Oh, yes, I need to try to repeat that. Yeah, I will, thank you. So I don't actually, as much as I do care why Abraham, today I'm actually not so interested in that question. I'm much more interested in what is the purpose of Abraham being chosen. And I think that's actually a much more interesting question, and there's actually a lot more Judaic content related to that than making a whole lot of analogies about why Abraham. So what was Abraham's purpose? Why did God choose Abraham from what we just read? To make a nation. Okay, good. One, to make a nation. What else? Perfect. I will make you a great nation, and you will be, and I'll bless you, right? And you shall be a blessing. If I had to sum up what Abraham's mission is, you'll be a great nation, and you'll be a blessing to the world. Great. Now, what are you going to do about that? So with that, I'm actually going to fast forward to next week's Torah reading. And I want to read out loud, or I'll read for you this text, which comes from next week, these 8 verses in Genesis chapter 18. Probably many of you know this story. They see all the terrible things in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and this is what God says. Now that the Lord had said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him. For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right, in order that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. I'm going to pause there for a moment. What's going on in, imagine God's mind for a moment, right? I think of this as God having a conversation with himself in some ways. What is God contemplating doing here? Okay, so one is whether or not to destroy the city, but what is God thinking about? What should I do before I destroy the city? Should I let Abraham know that I'm about to destroy these two cities? And why is God considering letting Abraham know? Okay, he has family there, that's one, but that's not what God is worried about, actually. At least not according to these few verses. Why is God considering to tell Abraham, thank you, Ron. Why is God considering to tell Abraham to do something?
Well, it says, for I have singled him out, and he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of the Lord, which is just and right.
Great.
All warning. Hey, look at what I can do.
So you're saying it's a warning. So Abraham, if you don't do what I expect of you, watch what I'm about to do, I will destroy these cities. You're seeing it as a warning, okay? A promise. Okay, good.
Well, I kind of see it opposite, that since he singled him out, and he's wanting this to happen, do you not kind of share with him, since he's supposed to be this great person and God's the one who chose him?
So I chose you and
Honesty, right?
yeah, a little honesty. You know what? Before I do this thing, I'm just going to give you the heads up what I'm about to do, right? We've been seeing this a lot with Israel right now, right? America expects to be told before Israel acts. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of warning. I'm going to do this in 10 minutes, but I just want you to know, Abraham. Okay, what else? Sorry, I'll come right over here. One second.
It says that he's questioning the last sentence, whether it should be done. I think he wants to see what Abraham's reaction.
Great, so you want to see... So it's not a promise, it's not a warning. Maybe it's, Abraham, I want to see how you're going to act at this moment. Okay, good. Yeah.
I think it's going to tie into the next part. I think God just doesn't want, God expects, he doesn't want to go through the debate with Abraham about whether this should be done or not.
So you think he doesn't want to go through the debate? Okay.
He's like, I don't know if I should tell him because they're going to argue. I just don't have the energy right now. I'm going to go up to 2 cities.
Right. I don't want to argue with you. It's not worth the energy. Or I already know what I'm going to do, so I don't want to make you feel bad if you argue back with me. And Carl's saying the exact opposite. Actually, God is saying, I want Abraham to respond, or see how Abraham will respond. Possibly. I'm just going to highlight in a moment because we're going to go somewhere in a moment and I think you're going to see this. What other pivotal moment do you know in Abraham's life that is really challenging? Great. Great. So all of you got this right? Right? It's the story where we read it on Rosh Hashanah, so it's probably fresh in your mind, where God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac, not Ishmael that we read about this morning, but Isaac, this son that him and Sarah had in their old age. He sacrifices, and what does Abraham do in that text? I didn't bring it for you, but what does Abraham do? But before that, Abraham, the Torah says he gets up early the next morning as if he's excited to go do what God just asked him to do, and he doesn't protest at all. He doesn't say, "What, God? You want me to do what?" He doesn't do that. So you may be right that we do have this tendency as a Jewish people to argue with each other. That's really what the whole Talmud is. But if we want to be honest with Abraham, at that moment where he's told to sacrifice his son, he does not do that. So what happens? I know I paused in the middle of the reading of this text. So I'll continue the second paragraph on that chapter 18. The men went out from Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. And what does Abraham do? Abraham came forward and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you wipe them away? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the 50 who are in it? Far be it for you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty. So the innocent and the guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" So Abraham, you said, what was singled out, Becky? Why? To do what? Abraham was chosen to do what? To be a good and blessed nation and to do what is right and just, right? We get that. So now what does Abraham do? He pleads for justice of the innocent and says what to God?
How can you take everyone and treat them all the same despite their actions?
Are you really going to do this, God? You're the judge of the entire earth? I expect more from you. That's essentially like, no way. I don't believe in you. That's not what I asked. That's not what I signed up for. I just want to point this out. How long has Abraham known God at this moment? Not very long. Right? This morning we read, Lech Lecha. I don't have an exact answer. Lech Lecha, right? But think about it. This morning God says, get up and go. He hasn't had Isaac yet. Or by here he does, right? Next week, the Torah readings, Isaac is born, and then we find this, where Abraham now is going to argue and challenge God and say, you chose me to be a blessing to the world, and you're not going to uphold the same thing. I don't buy it. I mean, think about the chutzpah. That's what I titled it, right? Think about the chutzpah of Abraham at that moment to go to God and say, could you imagine going to your boss on your second day of work and saying, no way. I mean, that's essentially what Abraham does here. I don't believe it. I'm the challenging you, God.
So we went over this a second ago. Maybe I missed it.
Okay.
What does it say about Abraham that he won't challenge God about killing his son, but he will challenge him for killing innocents in the town when his son is innocent?
Yeah. So I don't want to go too far down that road because we'll really get lost, and we'll have to do it a different conversation. Maybe come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll do that. There's a level of faith and a level of test, right? And was he really thinking that he would do it? So I don't want to go so far down that road. We can bring lots of midrashim and discuss that one day. But I do think it's an interesting idea, and the rabbis really cover it up. There's no question. We'll come back to that one. Carl?
I was just going to comment on the fact that after Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham knew that God would do whatever was right after he accepted his arguments. And so when he came to finding Isaac, he said, God, do whatever is correct.
Maybe. But here, God actually doesn't do what he wants, right?
Well, we don't know that. Because Abraham argues, I get 50, 40, whatever, and apparently the Lord wasn't the
We'll see. We'll see. So I find this, yeah.
I was going to say, with the binding of Isaac, God specifically requested an extremely specific sacrifice.
Yeah.
But didn't give a reason, he screwed up in this or yelled at you or whatever, so let's go kill him on the mountain. You know what? It was this city has committed wickedness and isn't getting it together. And therefore, Abraham has the right to say, well, what about those who didn't participate? What about those who are innocent?
Right. So,
I think it's countering given the reason that God gave.
right. I think it's really remarkable where Abraham is basically saying, like, there's innocent people, God, and if there's innocent people, spare them. That's what Abraham. So I want to share with you how Rabbi Jonathan Sacks understands this dialogue. God invites Abraham to do these things because he wants him to be the parent of a nation that will do these things. He does not want the people of the covenant to be one that accepts the evils and injustices of the world as the will of God. He wants the people of the covenant to be human, neither more nor less. He wants them to hear the cry of the oppressed, the pain of the afflicted, and the plaint of the lonely. He wants them to accept the world that is, because it is not the world that ought to be. How does that apply to us today? Yeah. Yeah. Right. You're 100% right. Jonathan Sacks is reading this, that he wants Abraham, thus all of us, to argue for what we know is right. And so I asked you the question, when I paused in reading that section of the Torah, why did God think about telling Abraham? It was, Jonathan Sacks reads it as very much as, God told Abraham this because God wanted something to be different. Didn't want blind obedience, invited Abraham to respond back and say, show me what you're worth. And because that's Abraham, right, the introduction to us, the Jewish people, that's what you and I are supposed to do, according to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, in reading this text. And I think it's a beautiful analogy about us, right? And like we look out at the world, and I think this last line is beautiful. He wants them to accept the world that is, because it is not the world that ought to be. We know the world is far from what it should be. And so what is our responsibility? And Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says, you better go and argue and do just as Abraham did. Don't accept it as it is, but make it different.
Can we substitute the word argue with challenge? Because
Sure.
every time you hear the word argue, it comes as a negative
Okay.
connotation, but I prefer the word challenge.
Very much. Yeah, I totally appreciate that, yes. Argue has a negative, right? But challenge God, right? To say, is that the best we could be doing? Correct.
Is that the way the world ought to be?
Correct.
Meaning, like in today's society, if you see something, if I see something, it's my right to challenge you. Not to argue,
Yeah.
right? Because I argue my life.
Yes.
So that's one thing. I don't want to compare the same. If you
No, I appreciate it. No, I think you're totally right. Challenge is a better way of describing this than arguing. This is in a positive connotation, not in a negative. Very much so. Thank you. Wrestle versus fight. Exactly. Yeah.
I would almost, I think about, we talked about even last week with the ark and our whole worlds, right? That we as humans were created by God, but God gave us the mindset to not just do, but to think and create, right? So it's kind of the perfect example of saying, walk in God's view, but be able to know what is right and wrong, and not just stay quiet.
Yeah.
Which is the problem we have right now. You ask before, how does it affect today? Right? Not just Israel and what's going on, and you talk about America and Israel, but just kids in school, right? All these things that we're questioning each day, and sometimes we follow and go see that.
Yeah. We have to learn how to challenge for what we know is what we believe is right. And that's exactly what Abraham does, and we are the inheritors of this tradition of Abraham. And I'll say it further. I said it earlier, right? Jacob's name becomes changed. Right? When does Jacob's name become changed? When he wrestles with God. Same idea. That's who we are. So I want to share with you for a moment, because most times we're in congregation. You can flip the page to source 4, to Aleinu. This is like the final prayer we recite each and every time we're in the service. Yes, I know a mourner's Kaddish comes after it, and then oftentimes we add this beautiful piece of poetry known as a Tikkun Olam, but this is like the last piece of true liturgy. And we do a great job singing the first paragraph, Aleinu l'shabeach, right? And we don't actually sing the second paragraph. And the second paragraph, I think, has one of my favorite lines of all liturgy. Okay? And so, God, our God, we await you, that soon we have behold your strength, revealed in full glory, sweeping away the abominations of the earth, obliterating idols, establishing the world in the sovereignty of the Almighty. I took this from Sidor Lev Shalem, but I actually don't really like the translation. Don't tell anyone I said that. All translations are interpretation, but I'm going to read you the Hebrew. The Tikkun Olam b'malchut Shaddai. Anyone know a word they hear in there? The Tikkun Olam b'malchut Shaddai. What? To repair the world. Yeah. In the glory of God. The Tikkun, to repair the world. Anyone ever heard of Tikkun Olam? The Tikkun Olam, same word. This is the final paragraph we say before we essentially walk out of services every single day, morning, afternoon, and evening. That you just did all of this stuff in the sanctuary, connecting yourself to God, and what is it supposed to do? To get you to walk out those doors, or whatever doors you're in, and to literally, the Tikkun Olam, to perfect the world, to repair the world, in the glory and the sovereignty of what God wants. And I think it's the exact same charge that we're getting from Abraham. You can sit in here and do all the prayers you want, but you also better take that and walk out those doors in the Tikkun Olam, to repair the world. I'm going to share two last texts because I know we're going to get late and the kids are going to expect to come in here and then eat. So I want to share these last two texts. You can see there's a lot from Jonathan Sacks here, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. In Judaism, faith is not acceptance, but protest against the world that is, in the name of the world that is not yet, but ought to be. The aim of the Bible is not to transport the believer to a private heaven. Instead, its impassioned, sustained desire is to bring heaven down to earth. Until we have done this, there is work still to do. Anyone have a reaction to his quote there? You like it. Why do you like it?
It's hopeful.
You like hope. But it's more than hope, I would say.
I think some people is that from my background is that we want to go do everything over ourselves so we can get to heaven, versus y'all that focus on putting them down to earth to make it's not just the focus of getting to heaven, it's the focus of putting the people that would even the non-Christians
Yeah.
that was everyone, and so we all make the world a
Right.
better place.
Right.
Not just involved in voting, you read it wrong, or like when we did before, that we need to be for a better place than where we came in.
Right. That's exactly what Jonathan Sacks says, right? Make the world a better place. The Tikkun Olam, right? I just said that, right? That's the final charge we get on the Aleinu. Go out and do this. Why did I say it's more than hope for Ron? Because I think it's not just, hope is saying, I want something to change. It's a plan, and it's a responsibility, right? Yes, it's hopeful, there's no question. But hope is I expect somebody else to change it. A plan or a responsibility says, I'm going to change it.
I was saying it's a call to action not rooted in anger and fear, but in wonder.
Yeah.
And it is explicitly stated to be intrinsically a part of Jewish faith practice.
It is incumbent. This is what I'm trying to get to this morning. The first thing we learn about Abraham is to be a blessing to the world, right? I actually don't care why he was chosen. I care what did God choose him to do? And it was very clear, right? Chooses him, Becky said it. God chooses Abraham to be a blessing, to do what is right and just in the world, and then literally, as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says, invites Abraham to argue against what God is going to do and says, that is not right and just, and I want to see how you're going to respond. And so each and every one of us, how many times a day, a week, a year, in our lifetime do we come across something that we know is not just or right? And if you keep your mouth shut, if you don't do the action that you know is right, you're literally not inheriting what Abraham and thus all of us as Jews are supposed to inherit. And now I'm going to give you homework. Little homework. People often ask me, what is my all-time favorite book? I have lots of them, but in the Jewish world, it's this book that I'm about to read you one text from, and one of these other texts actually came from this book, from Jonathan Sacks. And it's To Heal the Fractured World. And it's a small book, it's 200 pages, it's a yellow cover. If you want to read one of the most magnificent books about Judaism and what our responsibility is, order it from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, To Heal a Fractured World. And this is one of the amazing excerpts from that book. There are two seas in Israel, the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. The latter is full of life, fish, birds, and vegetation. The former, as its name suggests, contains no life at all. Yet they are both fed by the same river, the Jordan. The difference is that the Sea of Galilee receives water at one end and gives water at the other. The Dead Sea receives, but does not give. The Jordan ends there. To receive without reciprocating is a kind of death. To live is to give.